Everyone wants a Tomcat in their collection, but you don't need a $100 super kit to get started. I picked up this 1980 tooled Revell F-14A for just over $20 after a 40% sale at Hobby Lobby. And today, we're tackling the heart of the jet, the cockpit. We're building this 100% out of the box. No resin, no 3D printed parts except for maybe a Rio because it wasn't included. Just old plastic and some specific techniques to push this vintage office far beyond its $21 price tag. From fixing 40-year-old mold marks to creating glass instrument screens, let's see what we can pull out of this budget cockpit build. The first step for creating the CRT or green screen look is to paint a base color of gloss black. I've thinned this paint about 50-50 to have it cover a little more smooth, and actually want to create a little bit of transparent in the center, as you'll see there, with dark around the edges to mimic what the screens look like, and thinning the paint helps achieve that goal. It also helps eliminate brush marks and whatnot. The next step, because this is Rio, we need to add a dot in the center of the round screen for the radar scope. And now the step of covering this in Tamiya clear green. We're just to dabble that on, cover to the edges, and then we'll give it a chance to dry. And here are the final results of that, and you can tell it looks a little more black. But then we're going to come back with some testers, clear parts cement / window maker, and we're going to cover over that. And this does take quite some time to dry, but here are the final results. It looked pretty good. And now we're ready to paint the top of the instrument cluster here with a dark gray, which is what was indicated by the instruction manual. And now we're ready to put on the decals. And for that, we're first going to put some micro set down, and then we'll go ahead and apply the decals. I'll spare you going through each decal one by one, just showing you the general technique. The decals are pretty decent quality, especially once we apply some microsol to solvent basically to have them conform to the surface. I had to use 3 coats of microsol on all of the decals to get them to appropriately adhere to the contour of the raised gauges. And the end result looks pretty good, especially considering this is, again, $22 kit and was tooled in the 1980s. Here we are ready to put on the decals for the sides of the cockpit that represent the various switches. Just delicately place that, line it up the best you can with the raised plastic underneath, and then again attach some microsol. And again, it took 3 coats of microsol to get this decal to adhere properly. And here's the final product, and you'll notice it has quite a bit of gloss to it, and we're going to solve that in the next step after we glue the cockpit together. There is a little trick, if you'll stay tuned for that, to make them look a little more realistic, or at least from my perspective. Here we're painting the inside of the cockpit with a dark gray as per the instructions. I doubt if this will be seen. I actually plan on doing a canopy closed flying version of this kit overall, which you'll see in future videos, and I hope that you will watch those as well. We're just doing a little light dry brushing of some silver here just to give some contrast and show just a little bit of wear within the cockpit here. I apologize for the messy bench. I should have cleaned it off before taking this shot, but I'm guessing that most modelers have a messy bench at one point in time or another. Here we're using Revell Ultra Matt Varnish, and we're gonna just cover this straight out of the bottle over the top of all the decals to reduce the sheen and give them a far more flat look. It looks much better, as you can see in this shot here. And then we're ready to marry the cockpit into the fuselage. And you can see the light from the camera is not shimmering off of those decals, and that is what we want to have it look like. Here we're going to use Tamiya extra thin cement to attach the back of the seat assembly, and then I'm actually using a very thick CA glue to attach from the back side. Speed that up, I sprayed that off camera with some setting solutions. Here's one of the major problems this kit has, which is pretty significant ejector pin marks. Oddly enough, on the back side of the mold, there is nothing, which is a little frustrating that they put them on the face, but maybe that's the way the manufacturing process works. I actually don't know. I just know it's really annoying to have to deal with this. So we got to remove the raised edges around the ejector pin marks, and then we're going to come back. In this case, I'm going to show you two methods to do that. Here we're using Sprue Goo to fix them, and actually got a little bit too much, so we can just use a hobby blade to scrape off the excess and then gently tamp it down to smooth it out and make it look correct. And we'll set that down and let gravity do the rest. And the second method, this is definitely my preferred method, is to use Tamiya Putty, and then I'm going to mix this with some lacquer thinner and use a very old brush, and we'll stir that together till we get a very, I don't know, velvet cake batter like consistency. At least that's how I would describe it. It's very cake batter like, which allows it to flow quite well, and that will allow us to dab it into the appropriate areas, and then gravity will pull that in and allow it to set very flat, which is the desired outcome. There's really nothing special here. Get a glop of the velvet putty on the end of a brush and simply dab it in until you have enough that when gravity pulls it down flat, that it's as even as it possibly can be with the surface. You may have to experiment with this, a little bit of trial and error. It took me a few times to figure out exactly how much to put in and how to get this right, and sometimes you have to come back and sand. But nothing that you wouldn't have to do, and it's definitely always going to look better than having these big round ejector pin marks where there shouldn't be any, and the end result you'll see here in a minute looks pretty good. Now we're ready to use some Mr. Hobby 500 to finish the job of leveling this out. You'll notice I dipped that in leveling thinner my brush in leveling thinner before I painted this on. I actually find that this allows this very coarse primer to flow smoothly and provides a very good surface that I don't have to spend a lot of time sanding, so that's a definite plus. While we're letting that cure, we're going to go ahead and spray the top with Tamiya flat brown. This is thinned about 60-40, 60% paint, 40% thinner. I like to do multiple coats relatively thin. And now we're going to do some wet sanding. So I took a flat toothpick and just cut off a chunk of my steedy. This is a little pro tip. Super glued that, gave it some time to dry, and that gives me something easy to hold on to with this little bitty tiny piece of paper. And I don't have to do a lot of sanding here because I was very careful with both the putty and the priming stage. Now that that's complete, we're ready to put some flat black over the top of it. And one of my favorite things in modeling is the airbrushing and watching the color change between primer and each coat. I guess I love to see that transition of color. Okay, we're ready to attach the sides. Again, we're just going to use our good old faithful Tamiya extra thin. I love this stuff. I wish it would have existed when I was a kid. I probably would have had a lot less fingerprint marks. But tell me, when your first models, how many fingerprint marks did you have typically per model? So I'll tell myself, and there was at least 5. Just could not avoid it. And I didn't know well enough at the time to even attempt to sand them out later. So some of my models were pretty rough, and I kind of wish I had some of them, but I blew most of them up on the 4th of July here in the States. So at least I had some fun with them outside of their original build. And again, Tamiya extra thin, we're just going to glue the top on. Pro tip here, if you want, you can use some CA glue on the back side to hold this together and then activator to hold it in place, but this actually snapped together pretty well. I didn't really need to do anything special. It all just held up pretty well, so that was really nice. I really like this Tamiya yellow. I really struggle with yellow. Typically, I'll either paint the underside pink or white, depending on the tone of yellow that I'm after. In this case, you can see I left it a little bit gray. But this Tamiya yellow with the alcohol I have there in the cup, when I feel like it's getting a little bit too thick in my brush, I'll go ahead and dip my brush in the alcohol to allow the paint to flow more smoothly from the bristles. But this took only 2 coats of paint, and that is pretty exceptional for yellow in my experience. I have struggled to find good quality yellow paint, and this particular yellow here is about the best that I found. And now we're going to paint the appropriate sections red that need to be red, with the exception of the ejection loops, which we will add red to after they've cured well. And now we're ready to paint the seat belts their appropriate green color. I do plan on making this a flyer, so this detail will be covered up by the Pilot and the Rio, which this kit did not come with the Rio. And I either will 3D print one if I can find a plan to purchase for that, or I will order Rio as part of a later build. In the build of the actual plane itself, you will see me go through a painstaking effort to convert it from a model that's designed to sit on landing gear to one that's flying. In fact, I went so far as to have weight in the nose and whatnot, expecting to make this a standing model. But I actually have a t-shirt that says, because I was inverted and I just had a wild hair, I guess, and decided that it would be neat to do a mounting kit where the plane could be mounted through the back exhaust with orange colored LEDs to look like the afterburners were kicked in, and I could flip the plane either inverted or standard. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but as it stands, in future videos, you will see me build this as a flyer, and building the actual plane part is definitely a challenge. Okay, now that I've talked you through all of that fine detail painting, we're ready to apply a wash here. And I did go ahead and quickly spray this with a gloss varnish to allow this wash FX to flow smoothly. And then after I apply the wash FX, I always come back after it's cured and I will apply the appropriate flat or satin varnish depending on the appropriate use case. I thinned this out about 50% so I wouldn't have to do a bunch of cleaning. I kind of want to have it leave this rough stained edge to mimic the fabric of the foam cushions. And I dry brushed the side of that with silver. Overall, pretty happy with the results. And here's what the seats will look like inside the cockpit. Obviously, still have to paint the cockpit, still working on the plane itself. So stay tuned for future videos. Have a blessed day.